housing implementation for tenants.
Okay.
That's it. Simple City is finished that. All these programs are being given, right? After the housing implementation is verified,
Yeah.
just if they're they're done. It's not right. So for everyone now is hiring people. Sure, we have programs or studies. Sometimes we may not work. Say, for example, for Temple City, they wanted to investigate shared parking arrangement where most people can come and stay at night. In January, stay in areas. The more they to go, for the dog, or get up. So they want us to parking or to hold the fares that they get so we just natural and then we give them some options to what they do. So then this will happen. See if they will do it or not. They have that all support.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're good. We're live streaming.
So if you want to start, I guess you want to welcome to.
So if you don't mind presenting from the front, that's a clicker. Just right there in the front, this is the microphone. So just speak normal.
Do you have a staff report or you want to introduce?
So you're
Just present. Okay. Right. Very
You're good to go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, members of the public, city officials, staff, city manager, those who I know. My name is Isaac George. I represent Realty Planners Group. It's a planning consulting company. And we have been hired by the county to do what is the multi-jurisdictional housing element for the sixth cycle, which includes the county as well as all the 4 cities in the county. And today what we will talk about is the need for the housing element, what a housing element is, and the steps, the process that we will go through, and what are some of the state mandates in terms of completing or fulfilling the requirements of a housing element. And we will also talk about a fair housing analysis that has been imposed on us or required by law. And since this year, beginning this year, they require full-fledged fair housing analysis. And we will go into some of the details as to what it is and what the components of a fair housing analysis are. So for the record, we also want to say that we have a Spanish interpreter for those who do not speak or understand English or prefer to hear or understand these in Spanish. We have an interpreter available, and that's for the record. In terms of the process is the most important part in any planning exercise. Beyond, when we talk about generally any planning exercise, any planning documentation plans, there is a procedural aspect to it and a substantive aspect to it. So in terms of the procedural due process, we got to conduct workshops, public hearings, notices, and that becomes the procedural due process portion. The substantive aspect is addressing the elements, the yardsticks of measurement or policies or what it is and what it is not, the regulatory measures in it as well. So here we have to do both the substantive as well as the due process. And in that, public workshops becomes the #1 aspect that we must take care of. And today, the goal is to have members of the public address us if anyone shows up, because the state requires us to do the outreach. And we have, as the city planner has mentioned, prior to this meeting, that extensive outreach was done so that we could elicit their support and their comments. Generally speaking, a lot of people don't show up. That is generally the case in small cities, and not only small cities. Actually, the other day we had the county workshop, and there was no one from the audience. So we are going to do some additional work, maybe reaching out through some surveys and things like that, so the state would feel happy about it. So in this public workshop, we will talk about the draft housing element preparation, what is involved in it, and why a public review would be required as per law of this draft element prior to us sending it to the state. The agency looking at these draft and commenting upon would be the Housing and Community Development Department. In short, they are called HCD. You will hear me mention about HCD several times. And we also do a basic perfunctory environmental analysis, usually an exemption of sort. And once the draft document is approved by the state, that means it's reviewed, comments are provided, we respond to it with appropriate comments, with programmatic actions proposed. Then finally, they will say, yes, your document is good. It meets substantially the requirements of state law, state housing element, and other related laws. And here you go. So once they approve it, we will take it to the city council of the city, and the city council will adopt it. And once they adopt it by resolution as a policy document, as a general plan, we will send that adopted document plus the copy of the resolution to HCD, and they will go through, make sure that all procedural and substantive matters are taken care of, and they will give you what is called a certification. So when we receive that final certification letter, our housing element can be determined to be legally defensible, at least in the opinion of the state. You know, I mean, it's subjective, because a nonprofit entity might come and say, hey, you have holes in your housing element. And anybody can literally question some of those policies, to why it is so, and how did you arrive at it, and things like that. But those are issues that we actually would have expected to have happened in this place, in this context, or nonprofit entities to come and question, work with us, and make this really a planning exercise, a grassroots effort, building it up from the bottom and then up. And planning is always is basic. It's the people's plan. I mean, the city council adopts it, planning commission reviews it. Who are they? They are representatives of the people. And so therefore, everything that a city makes is the people's plan. I will go to the next slide. Today is the date of the workshop, and we hope to bring to you the draft element by December, January, because our statutory deadline to approve the housing element is January 31st. However, the same law allows every city and county an additional 4 months to be able to finish up and get it approved and certified. So the statute allows us that extended time limit. So we usually, at the time the contract is awarded to a consultant, we upload the housing workshop within about the 30 to 60 day time frame. Here we wanted to wait a little bit more, because we wanted to know, to do some analysis on the decennial census results compared to the 2010 and 2020 results, to see how our community looks like. What's it our community representing in terms of total population, number of households, poverty, and things like that. We will come to that in a while. And we hope to have the element adopted by April, May, because that's towards the end of it. Now, one catch here, sometimes no matter what you do, sometimes the deadline doesn't get met in very rare situations, because the state has to approve it. Only when they approve it, we can adopt it. There is a thing called self-certification where cities go ahead and adopt it by themselves, but it really does not relieve you from a lot of obligation. In some ways it helps, but in some other ways it doesn't help because you still don't have a certified element unless the state approves it. You can adopt it 100 times you want, but if they say, well, it's not compliant, what good does it do? Then you are opening ourselves to legal liabilities, right? So what is a housing element in short? It is the vision of the city to have housing provided to all income groups, and that's a catchword, all income groups for everyone in town. And it has to be administered in an affirmatively furthering fair housing action. That means whatever we administer must be fair, and there is something called fair housing and fair housing laws, and they deal with policy matters such as discrimination, poverty, concentrated neighborhoods with some ethnicity or the other, and whether something like that exists in our community or not, that is not the issue. The issue is that if there is segregation in general, the state and the Fed have an overwhelming interest in making sure that is not the case. Some of us may argue that aren't these remnants of the past and not so much in nowadays that we see it? Yeah, we probably don't see as much of that in the current situations because communities do change. Say, for example, we are doing another housing element for another community. Once upon a time, they used to have certain racial groups predominantly, say, for example, white population. But things have changed over decades, and it has become now almost 90-95% Hispanic. But even then, if you analyze the census and the population statistics, there is some segregation in between those communities as well. So it's not necessarily bad, but we want to find, does it exist? If so, what can we do to ameliorate that situation so that we can treat everyone the same, we can provide everyone the same services and things like that. And you will see more of that when we go into the fair housing analysis and the components of that. All right, thank you. And by the way, the housing element is an 8-year process. We are in the 6th cycle, and it will run from now through 8 years. I think it's 23, 32 period. The steps in updating the housing element is the review and revision of the existing housing element. We have a 5th cycle housing element. It had programs. We will look at the programs and say what worked and what did not work and why it did not work. So if you want to continue some of the programs, the state wants to know what will you do to make sure that this time the program will work, right? In the past, if it didn't work, it has to work, right? If you have a program, it has to make sense. So they want to know why it did not work and what will you do in addition if you continue the program to the next 8 years. In particular, what are you planning for? What timelines? Where do you get the money from? Who is in charge of administering it? Is it the city manager's office or is it the community development director, the planning department? They want to know the specifics and we will tell them this is how we devise it. We will incorporate new programs as well. For example, since the last element was done, so many different housing laws have come into picture and the state has told us to do certain things automatic. I remember in the olden days, if it was zoned for single family, then as a matter of right zoning, you will be able to build one house on a lot. That's a legal lot. But today, with certain new laws like SB 9, for example, the State Bill 9, It says that if you have a single family lot that is legal size and whatnot, anyone can request the city to automatically subdivide that into 2 lots. So the city is nowhere, city or county in California cannot deny if they come up with an application. Similarly, ADU laws, accessory dwelling unit laws. SB 9 also has a accessory dwelling unit law, but those are slightly different. Between the existing housing element law and the SB 9, they are treated slightly different. The cost of construction on those are slightly also different. So any programs that we have brought in, the state has brought in, and where we have to do a certain amendment to the housing element as well as the zoning code, because the zoning code is the one that lets us build, and that has to be amended. And so that becomes a program. Say, for example, we will amend the zoning code pertaining to ADUs, if you don't allow ADUs as it is now, or number 2, provide in compliance with SB 9 automatic subdivisions. Then additionally, if you have affordable housing, then you have to streamline the approval process and ministerially approve them. And if you have design reviews, you've got to have design review standards predetermined and enunciated in this zoning code. In other words, there has been always a lot of controversy about design reviews. The codes have always said design review has to be specific, and if it is not specific enough, it is too broad and generic, and it's very difficult to administer, and there would be subjectivity. Like, you are the planning commissioner this time, but next year somebody else will come. So there is a subjective element as to what you think, whether this design is good or bad. Is that color good? Is this fenestration good? Is this setback good? Is that look good? So there could be a lot of subjectivity. In order to avoid that, these specific standards have to be enunciated into the zoning code, added into the zoning code. And therefore, it is fair across the board. Everybody knows what the end game is, and it can be approved by staff at staff level. And those will be the examples of changes that we will have to make. And the critical part in performing an inventory, we will do what is called a site inventory, because eventually we will get to what is called RHNA, regional housing numbers. These are the numbers that the state tells us that we will need to build or facilitate to build. I mean, the question is, what do you mean by need to build? I mean, we don't have the money, city cannot build them, and we are not in the building them. But that is true and fair. But we have to facilitate for someone like me who may want to put a 100-unit apartment complex or build a subdivision of 100 units, and you have to make it easier for me to be able to come and build without so much of red tape. That is what the state is saying. Yeah, we're going to make more of these things ministerial, predetermined, so that there is not much of a time delay in establishing these, accomplishing these. So the site inventory would be a list, a massive list of vacant properties that we have beyond 6,000 square feet, and it will have the parcel ID number, the acreage converted into square footage, and this year on, they also want us to see, you know, if you have this parcel, what kind of housing do you plan on accommodating there or plan on building there? A low-income house, very low income, moderate income house, above moderate. So in one of the columns, we'll say, yeah, we plan to be able to build 5 homes and likely moderate income. And then we add up the totals and say, yeah, this matches and meets our requirements for building the total number of low-income homes, above moderate homes, and the like. And that number, I will show you an example of how the table will look like as we go through this. The site inventory also must show the environmental, negative environmental factors associated with that parcel, any impacts that you foresee. Say, for example, you may have a lot of vacant land and parcels to show, but at the same time, you might have a lot of oil wells in there. right? So if you have an oil well on a piece of parcel, sometimes there are restrictions on what you can build and how you can build, and distance requirements by the DOGR, the Division of Oil and Gas. And so we also have to say it's impacted by flood area, it's impacted by Arcus-Priolo zones or earthquake zones otherwise, or any other environmental issues hindering development. And so the state would know, you have 100 lots and 50 of them are hindered. And so how do you meet your obligation? Find out something else or increase your density, right? So you can accomplish that both ways, sir. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I got your point. The regional housing needs assessment numbers are determined by the state government based on certain studies, based on number of housing that we have done in the past, as well as other demographic factors. So this is a number that they create and give to the COGS, the Council of Governments, or what is also called the Association of Governments. So we have Kings County Council of Government, and they will then apportion these numbers to each and every jurisdiction within the county and say the county has to build so many, Avenal has to build so many, and also will tell how many low income or very low income has to be built. So it is a goal. It is not that we have to fulfill and produce that number at the end of the 8th cycle. If it is good, well and good. If we exceed, even better. But sometimes it's possible that the economy may tank. There may be situations, public health emergencies, acts of God, or whatever, and we may never build. We never build. Right. So if you really look at a scenario in the 5th cycle, we had a certain requirement. So in the 5th cycle, we may have gone over it or we may have been below it. But that doesn't mean a thing. That ends with the 5th cycle. So we start with a new cycle and we have a goal. And the main thing that the city has to do is to facilitate this. One, market rate housing. If a developer comes in, you've got to have the right zoning, right density, and reduce the red tape and providing incentives that we can provide, like faster processing and things like that. Yes. The developer is responsible for building all the infrastructure, but the developer knows upfront what the city's rules and regulations are, which has always been the case. Every city had development rules. But here, in order to accentuate that, to expedite that, the state has come up with some additional requirements. And that's where it gets more complex, where the zoning code has to be amended.
Does Avenal, part of it, is that included with the county? Or, because I know like Hanford and Lemoore, they have growth, they've had new housing developments, new locations. And obviously, like, they want to help make sure that even now with, multi-family homes or single family homes, kind of balance that out. Do those numbers affect Avenal? So I'm wondering, how many
every jurisdiction is responsible for their own numbers.
each city has decided to, in regards of how to distribute that. Sometimes it could be on population, or it could be based on our density of our cycle, or sometimes it could be based on what type of how much our loan looks like. So as of right now, the city of Avenal, in our region, was already adopted our which is right? Because they have the way to eat, the way KTH, which is our county area government, so we decided as a city as well as the county as well as the
Now, for example, you might say for Avenal, what are some of the numbers that we should meet? For extremely low, we have a number of 24, and very low 24, low 37, moderate 55, above moderate 137. So we have a total requirement of 277. So the 277 is one of the numbers for the entire county, in addition to Lemoore and unincorporated county and all the other cities. And those numbers, Kings County total for the entire Kings County jurisdiction is 9,429. So ours would be a small percentage of that, but as the city planner said, we have to meet those obligations ourselves. Good question. Thank you. Now, we also have to do what is called, as part of the analysis, affordability levels, which we talked about, which is whether it is low income or affordable, medium housing, above moderate housing. It also includes a fair housing analysis, and we will go into some of the components of the fair housing analysis now. These are itemized descriptions that the state wants to see in a fair housing analysis. So outreach, what we are doing today as part of the workshop is an outreach for the housing element preparation as well as the fair housing element, not the element, the fair housing analysis preparation. In the assessment, we will look at key data and background information pertaining to the community and also in relationship to the larger region, which is the county region. So we will do some comparisons. Then we will look at our city's fair housing enforcement and outreach capacity. Whether or not, I mean, we know we are a small city, and often small cities do not have the ability to mediate disputes or have dispute resolution possibilities, but they are done in connection with the county attorney's office, or if the county even doesn't have it, being small, they could also contract with nonprofit entities who are manned by attorneys and others who can also mediate disputes concerning fair housing. But we have to explain what's our situation where we have the capacity, what have we done, how do we handle complaints? If I live in, and as a resident, I come to the city planner and say, I have a complaint to do. Can you take my complaint or refer me to someone who can listen to my complaint and tell me what I can do, the due process behind it. We have to look at integration and segregation patterns and trends as to what our composition is in terms of the ethnic divide, the population characteristics, white, black, and Hispanic, and the typical demographic statistics. And we also have to look at racial or ethnic concentrations or areas of poverty within the city, certain pockets or not, whether it is existing or is it uniform. We look at disparities in access to opportunity. Opportunity is all about good schools, good parks for children to play, good schools where the children can go and excel in their careers, We talk about good schools and poor schools. If you have lousy school systems, our children don't have an opportunity to learn. But if we have a good magnet school, then we do have great opportunity, right? We don't have to send our children elsewhere to get good schooling. So opportunity index is a summary of many of these things, and then we will categorize a community as having low opportunities, medium opportunity, or very high opportunities, and that will come in the report. And disproportionate housing needs in the jurisdiction. Do we only have market rate housing and no affordable housing? Do we only have owner-owned housing but no rental possibilities? So we want to look at every sector and see what the statistics tell us. We will also look at displacement risk. Displacement risk happens when a low-income apartment or something gets knocked off, and then it goes into market rate. Typically, examples are when you have an affordable housing project with a 55-year covenant, because you have an affordable project because you got some grant, whether it is a USDA grant or home grant or CDBG grant from the state, or some cities directly get it from HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Authority, from the feds. You still have to meet these requirements, and then you've got to report those statistics back to the state, and the state then reports it back to the HUD. So we need to say whether or not we expect any displacement. A lot of towns we would analyze by saying, yeah, we do have a covenanted project. It has another 20 years of life, and we do not expect that to be displaced anytime soon. In some cases, these types of affordable homes, although they expire at the end of 55 years, they continue to serve the population as an affordable project, because some of them may be owned by the housing authority or some of the nonprofit, because their aim is not to make money, their aim is to serve the public and serve the public need. The site inventory is also related to the locations of these inventories in town, so that it is not concentrated in one place where we would say, yeah, this is where we are going to build all the low-income houses. So the state might say, why? Why can't you have low-income houses all over the place? Or why don't you integrate low-income with medium-income or high-income places? In the city of San Diego, we have examples. I believe like 30 years ago when I started as a planner, we have gone to the city of San Diego to see projects in $1 million community where they have integrated affordable housing with facilities for computer education and things like that. So when you go into this community, I mean, these are fabulous homes. But in that, with any distinction or any distinguishing characteristics, you have these smaller houses, but they are affordable homes. And San Diego has done that in the past. And so many other cities could also do the same kind of things rather than dumping everyone in one quarters because they're all affordable housing, low income kind of things. And so the state wants to get away from those kind of plans. And then finally, we will explain for all these what the contributing factors are. That's interpretation of the statistics, and then what our goals are, and these are essentially policies, and what our actions are, which are housing action plans. In terms of, yes, sure.
I have a question regarding
B and E, yes.
So, who's doing the
Who is doing the, please repeat, enforcement? Enforcement. This is where it goes back to number B, where we would explain fair housing enforcement and outreach capacity, right? A community is supposed to outreach to the common public and say, we do have these kind of facilities and what fair housing means, right? So what we probably would do as a program in the housing element, have a program which says that on the city's website, if we have one, we will inform the public as to what fair housing is and what their choices are. If you get discriminated in a housing complex, if you have problems with renting a place, if you have been evicted, if you're finding issues not being able to get a loan, you applied for it, but for some reason you think you will qualify, but they have not given you a loan, where do I complain? So these kind of issues can be dealt with by somebody, whether it is a city or the county or another nonprofit in the area. We will provide that information as a program and put that in the website. So you can call the city and the city will provide you an answer. I hope I've been able to explain that. I'm really glad that here you are asking questions, and rarely that has happened in some of the other previous ones.
It is. It's not really, not really written. So. Don't have our city attorney is not how the attorney is, so we need to help.
Because the concern is, fair housing means affordable housing. The intent is to have houses for sale, so that we can, renting. And it looks to me like when new housing development, they begin with supposedly affordable price. When they first start the process, they said it's going to be $240, $260,000. But then at the end, there's $300,000 more. Or even renting, we used to have homes for $560,000. Now, they need it. So it is good to have a good planning and paper, but then you need to enforce it or bring it into practice. Somebody needs to share that the residents are affordable to the community, that the home, when you need to have an home, they are good. Houses are 300 more, revenue more. So, we're talking about warehousing, it has to look like it's something that will be very
Yeah. It's a very interesting point, and I will use this opportunity to verify a distinction in terms of the concept of affordability and how affordable housing works, especially when it comes to renting or when it comes to ownership. According to the Housing and Urban Development Department of the federal government, affordability generally means, the definition of affordability is if a household, a single parent or two parent household, if they spend 30% or less of their gross income on a housing that you want to buy, that is affordable. But if you have to spend more than that, it is not affordable. But the question is there something done in a situation when somebody cannot afford? There is really no market mechanism to provide assistance other than, say, providing a first-time home buyer loan or grant from public entities. But beyond it, it is a sad situation that if you're in a community where the housing prices are more than what you can afford over 30% of your gross income, you're in a tough place. Say, for example, somebody like me who lives in San Diego have to pay probably 3 times the average price of a house here. But it is my choice to go and live there, right? I may or may not have the money. Some people may want to just by jurisdiction want to go and rent probably if they cannot afford it. But prior to that, I lived in the city of Bakersfield. It is half the prices. And for me, that's a much more affordable community. But the affordability for the purchase of the home is defined by your ability to pay no more than 30% of your gross income. Whether or not we can, it depends on individuals and families, and there are no real laws out there to come and help us other than giving first-time home buyer assistance. The other factor when it comes to renting, it's more control. So when you have renters as tenants, and if you want to rent, and if you are not able to pay the market rate rent, let's say we have an apartment complex here that sells at $1,000 per month, right? That's a typical rent, $1,000. I cannot afford it. I'm a family of 2-parent household with 4 children, and my income is not sufficient to go into a project like that. So in that case, what it says is that you can receive certain subsidies based on your income, whether it is at a point below the area median income. So in terms of affordability for rentals, you might qualify depending on the number of people in your household and the income that you have, whether you are 30% below the average median income for the county or 50% below the income or 80% below the income, you will get a larger subsidy for projects that are administered either by the housing authority or by any other nonprofit. Some housing authorities, they are a government entity. They own their own, they manage their own, but many churches and other nonprofits as well would do the same. So I wanted to bring that distinction because rarely people ask for these distinctions or the affordability issue. So one affordability definition for ownership is slightly different from rentals. So,
Is that a Section 8 voucher or is that a whole different?
the Section 8 voucher is a federal program, and they are fixed numbers that are assigned through the county. Yeah. No, that's not the same. Yeah. The Section 8 vouchers can be even given for staying in a hotel, not necessarily in an apartment complex. But some people might get Section 8 living in a market rate apartment complex. They might get some Section 8 assistance, and they will bridge the gap, and they'll be able to pay. Yeah. Sure. Sure. Thank you. Thank you. May I proceed? Yeah, you have one more question.
People can afford to move from one place to another while they can afford. Like the Bay Area, we've seen people migrating teenagers, but they still commute to work in the Bay Area. But in rural, Spanish community, some people don't have to show their come from people
Yes.
that used to be paying $500 to $600 for rent, now they're paying $1,000 or more because people are migrating from different areas to the state. they have slowed down. Now they have to how the question that is sequence.
True, true.
Now they have to come with income.
Sure. One of the relevant points in what you talked about, you mentioned about Bay Area. An affordable housing project in Bay Area would be called an affordable project, but they may be paying higher rent than what somebody would be paying here for an affordable project. Because remember, the area median income is determined county by county based on the standard of living, the many other statistical indices. And so every community doesn't have the same AMI. So people renting in a affordable housing project in San Francisco may be paying more and maybe getting a higher grant because there the housing prices are much higher than an affordable project that's here. So your point is valid that there are variations between communities to communities, but ultimately the answer to your question is that each and every community should strive to be able to build more affordable housing projects. The cities and counties don't have their own monies, because remember, in the olden days, we used to have something called the redevelopment agencies. Every county and cities had the power of eminent domain, as well as receive tax increments. But what happened is, historically, cities and counties have abused the eminent domain powers, and it has become so controversial. And because of that, the state has completely abolished the redevelopment agencies. But along with that, we also threw the baby in the bathwater, and cities and counties don't have the monies now to do rehabilitations, because those were primary sources for us to do code enforcement, providing rehab loans for our own community, providing assistance to low-income housing developers and things like that. And that has been literally wiped out. So the state needs to come up with mechanisms where there is more money available to be able to build affordable housing projects. The market can determine where you want to live. If you're rich, you can go to wherever you want. If I'm poor, I will move to some area where I can afford something, no matter what the definition of affordability is. But when it comes to rental, that affects the population of the lower tiers of our societies, and they are the ones who need special care and special mandates. So unless and until, a personal opinion is that the state comes up with more monies and assists cities, this problem is not very solvable in the immediate future. Even when we apply for affordable housing, it is highly competitive. We will hear about an agency called TCAC, the Tax Credit Allocation Committee, who gives millions of dollars for building affordable housing, but on a competitive basis. Many developers all over the state can apply for it, and only few projects gets funded. So when that happens, how do you build more affordable housing? When cities don't have money, how do you build affordable housing? When there is only one planning staff in the planning department, how do you manage fair housing? How do you manage a grant program? Because you need a separate staff to do the grant program by itself, because it gets very complex. It is not just to have applying for a grant, but once you get the grant, you need to administer the grant and report every year back to the state, and that needs full-time staff. So
that goes to B, right, where there's no capacity for the enforcement and outreach in terms of the like small applications.
yeah.
And from what you were mentioning earlier, have you ever?
Excuse me, I have a question, I'm sorry. Does that work for mic? The speaker?
Yes.
Do we use that? Sorry.
Says you're the audience with
You're able to speak, so I can listen in. I can hear you, because I have a. When I speak, I can listen. It's very hard to translate.
What was it? So my question was, has this fair housing analysis already been? And I know that part of the process is to do this part and have it be done by December 31st. So I think you mentioned that when the service open, that it's been completely, this part of it has been completely done. So that was my question. Just so that I know you were trying to go on. That's part.
Are we ready? We really appreciate the questions that are coming from you, because that is what we really expect of this workshop. We have a small group. However, I'm very pleased to see that you are asking the right questions and we are able to answer them in the best way possible. Okay. If we don't have answers for you, we will find the answers for you and give it to the city planner, who will communicate that to you. Now, we are passing around a sign-in sheet. When it comes to you, and if you have spoken or asked a question, just put a star next to your name. So then I will report that to the state, because sometimes the state wants to know who spoke and what they spoke and what was our answer. Or maybe we need to create some program to address your concerns. So then that will tell me, yes, this person has to ask the question. And I'm writing down your questions so I can productively make this report better. Okay.
And just to say that, so the fair housing analysis is part of the housing development process.
Yes.
So so that is included in the housing element right now. So we're in the process. Yes.
But some of the audience wants it to.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now, we kind of basically looked at the components of the fair housing analysis that will be provided in the report. We are going to now look at the changes in our demographics between 2010 and 2020. 2020, we had the last census that was taken. So you will see that on the top, there is one line that talks about total population and household population. So you might first ask what the difference is. Total population includes the household population plus anyone living in group quarters like nursing homes, any asylums, any military camps, prisons. They are residents of the city, but they are not household population. They don't live in households. So that's why you see the people in households are 9,406. And however, in our jurisdiction, we have a larger population, and that likely tells me that we have a prison here. Do we have a prison? Yeah. So we have group homes or other facilities. Now, our community is 87% Hispanic. All right. When we will analyze, we will also look how the community has transited over periods of time historically, and has there been any kind of noticeable changes in terms of the ethnic diversity in the community. And a lot of communities that we are working on have that, but still issues of diversity and poverty and housing and availability of affordable housing, they are all issues concerning every community. We have about roughly 2,752 households. A household could be an apartment unit that somebody rents with a family of 2 or 3 or 4, or a large house with one person living there and no children present, or no wife present, or no other family members present or partners present. It could be just one person, and that could be also a household. Owner-occupied, approximately 47-48% are owner-occupied, which is not bad. Typically, those numbers are about 50-52%. So we are pretty close. Almost 50% of the people have private ownership. That means the other 50% are renters. Persons per household is interesting, regardless of the fact that generally people say, well, you have a higher Latino population, you have large number of people in the house, you have overcrowding in the house, and that is the typical statistics that people think of. But here, if you really look at that, we only have 2.74 persons per household. That's a low number. If you really look at the state of California as a whole, it's more than 3. Some of the neighboring cities, you see it's close to 3. And that means the family size is small. And why is that so? That's interesting. Median household income is 49,000, approximately 50,000. It is not as high as some of the other communities in the county. And that obviously tells us that among our population, a lot of people are in the low-paying jobs. And that is also demonstrative of the fact that we have almost 25-26% of the people living in poverty. That means there is an income crunch. That's a very high number. Typically, we will see about 10-12%, but it's almost double that number. So we will look at programs that we can propose in the housing plan to see how we can help these communities. And bottom line is that this is a community that probably needs more affordable housing projects. It's almost a given. But how do you get it? How do you get to do that? That is a fundamental question that we will have to answer. The sources of these data are from the census data, and also what is called the ACS data. It's called the American Community Survey. It's part of the census data, but instead of a particular day count, 100% count like in typical census, ACS data is like a running average. So from 2000 to 2005, a 5-year interval, 2001 to 2006. So it's like a running average of special statistics that are not complete numbers, but estimates. So they have what is in statistical terms called margin of errors. So they are not absolute numbers. They are representative numbers. So we can say, if it says, yeah, 15% of the people are this, we can get an idea, an approximation, but it's not the absolute truth.
I have a question. So the poverty rate is 25.6%.
Yeah.
Is that based on the household population or is that based on the total?
is the household population. Yeah. Always based on household.
I also have a question. So the median income, 49,000, that's the median income. So I know for a fact, our families here are 20 or $30,000.
Yeah.
So I know for a fact that a lot of families have applied, if they don't qualify.
Yeah.
So that means you don't have affordable housing.
Yeah, it's
I'm talking about 10, 18, 20, maybe even more. Different census for a, the census, we know it's not accurate because based, the community fear, especially for the ones that do not have the legal status, they don't like the regular deeds, and how many family members of their household, so they cannot stay in the shape. So those people, won't qualify for a house, there's not a census for a, survey that can tell how many families can afford to buy a house in a lot of small communities, because nobody is really going out to buy a house, not as a governmental agency asking questions for the census. A lot of people do not reply. So I think we need to focus on real action, like I said before, planning paper is good, but it doesn't do any good because nobody complains or say anything, and nobody knows about what's doing. And not to be done. But I see the recommendations that there should be like every small group community, I mean, families that how
yeah. When we prepare our housing element, the draft document, we will also show you and provide you what level of or what percentage of our people are in what specific category in terms of these affordabilities. How much, say for example, when you talk about median household income, a median is the center number. Say you have 1 to 100 and 50 is like in the center, middle point. It is not an average, okay? From 1 to the last 120 added up, averaged out. It is not an average number, but it's the middle number. So that means that there are people above, 50% of the people are below 49,781, and 50% of the people are above 49,781. And there may be some people who may make $80,000 or $70,000, but we will provide you some statistics as to what percentage of the people in town make that kind of money. How many percentage makes 25,000? How many percentages make over the median? And so that will kind of help you with these finer statistics. These are some generic numbers, but we'll have a lot more tables identifying and categorizing our community by income and poverty, by renters and by homeowners. So then that will tell us how much of these people can really afford to buy a house if they can, or rent a place. And your answer is right, that looking at the poverty numbers, the key need for our community is affordable housing. And the question would be, how would we bring the monies in order to work with developers or nonprofit entities or the county to build additional affordable housing? And then the other portion is to how to incentivize mainstream developers to come. I know we don't have enough money to give them, but we could probably expedite our permitting process, you see? We could have what is called one-stop permitting. I mean, all of these sounds nice, but it's very difficult to have one person planning departments provide the service that the public expects. Because I've been also working in smaller cities in the same position as your city planner, a one-man operation with no other help, just a secretary. So there is only so much you can do when you are in charge of planning, building, code enforcement, economic development, and the whole 9 yards. How much time you have to do all of these? And in one-man planning operations, that's exactly what happens. It is not just about giving permits. We got to also attract businesses into town. And before the meeting, I know I was talking to some people here, and they said one of the critical issues that this community faces is not just housing, it's also about economic development, opportunity for employment. A lot of our people go out. So what can the city do, or do the city have the resources to be able to bring in additional economic development? And again, remember, we are kind of landlocked in the middle of the ag fields or the oil fields or the desert. So it is not sometimes always easy. If you're on an access point of 5 and 99, yeah, maybe that's a different story. But when we are kind of landlocked or isolated, it is even more difficult to get economic development as well. So everything has a relationship. If you have economic opportunities, you have possibilities for higher income, better schools, better infrastructure, better playgrounds, and so everything is connected. But because housing element deals with one aspect of the general plan, among many others, the focus here is about housing. Okay, thank you. So now let's move on to the next slide. And when we talk about fair housing, we will look at diversity index that will be about racial and ethnic diversity in overall town. We will look at income disparities. They are called Gini index or Gini index or Gini coefficients. If you have one, that means you're a perfect community with good income parity, right? If you're at 10, that means there is a lot of diversity. And I would definitely say that we would see some diversity in income in our community. Dissimilarity index is that talks about the distribution of racial or ethnic populations in different neighborhoods. This usually applies for larger cities with a lot of neighborhoods, like City of LA and other metropolitan areas. But for a small city such as ours, it's pretty uniform. We probably would say, hey, this is all our neighborhood, right? Just one neighborhood. Nothing really to separate or segregate as separate neighborhoods or particular council districts or things like that. It's just one whole little town. We will look at racially or ethnically concentrated areas of poverty. So just among poverty, is there one place here where you see a lot more poverty, like a census tract or not? We will look at racially concentrated areas of affluence. This rarely occurs because there are two conditions that must be met. That means there must be a tract in our town which is 80% or more white, and they also must have a household income, median income of more than 125,000. That rarely occurs in the current context in many small cities, so we will not see. However, there may be some disparities in some pockets that you can see. We talked about access to opportunities, what it means. That means better infrastructure, better schools, better playgrounds, and those kind of resources are what we are talking about. Disproportionate housing needs, which are overpayment and cost burdens. We talked extensively about it. We talked also about displacement when that happens. And usually when that happens, we could, as a city, if there is a potential displacement, we could issue notices. We could have an ordinance saying that the owner of that property must give not just 180-day notice, maybe more, not just 30-day notice, maybe 60-day notice. So we could legislate, and we will probably add some programs like that. And site inventory, as we said, we'll have to distinguish as low and moderate income or above moderate income on the parcels that we think we can build. And finally, we will talk about contributing factors to all these problems that we see and policies, and then we will look at some action plans, and that's the idea behind the entire preparation of the housing elements. We already talked about Avenal's need of 277 houses to be built, and that is about 3% of the total of the county. So it's a very small number. In fact, the city planner was saying that there is a subdivision that she's working on, which has over 100 lots, and maybe in the next 8 years, they will all be built, hopefully.
So, by looking at those numbers,
So at the end, we will show a table like this, which will be a quantification of how much we will build. The second row out there, which talks about remaining obligations from fifth cycle, just ignore that. There is no need actually to show any remaining obligations because we have no obligations to carry forward from the last cycle. If we built it, we built it. If we didn't, we did. So we only will have to look at the sixth cycle. That was in error, so just please ignore that. The very last two rows is about rehabilitation and conservation. So rehabilitation is where whether or not we have an active code enforcement program, we identify houses that needs additional repairs and things like that, and see if the city or the county in unison can provide for some funding for home rehabs, like home sidings or a painting job or something else that we can assist for homeowners with. That's the idea. So we will say, yeah, we hope to rehabilitate 5 homes in the 8-year cycle or 10 homes in the 8-year cycle. So as part of this, as we mentioned, the housing element is one of the elements of the general plan. The general plan has, I believe, 7 mandated elements that we must have, like housing, land use, safety element, conservation, safety, noise, and things like that. And housing is one of them. So anytime the law says you update one, it has to be consistent with all the other elements. In other words, you cannot have conflicting policies. You say one thing here and you say something else somewhere else. So your policies have to be identically correct, compatible, and internally consistent. They should conform to each other. That makes sense. Any law should be conforming, right? You cannot say one thing one place and say something else somewhere else. We also have to do some basic environmental analysis on the document because this is a plan. But because this is a policy document, we would just go with the basic environmental analysis for it, maybe issue what is called an exemption. That is under the California Environmental Quality Act. So finally then, this workshop should be asking the question, you have been smart enough to ask all these questions ahead of time, and that's very good. Like, what are the housing challenges facing the city? And we unanimously kind of feel that affordable housing is the issue, and that's what we don't have, considering our poverty and our lack of employment and inability to get better paying jobs. Our primary need is not just market rate housing, but also a lot of affordable housing, so that we know. And we also wanted to know what opportunities are available to the city to support housing needs. Pertaining to that, you have already asked the question in terms of enforcement and outreach. What do we have? I will talk to the city staff and find out what mechanisms we have. If we don't have, what else can be proposed or work in unison with the county or somebody else. So we will do that after this meeting is done. In the next few weeks. And we wanted to know what are the top 5 priorities as a resident of this town that you want. I mean, we talked about affordable housing. We talked about lack of opportunities for employment. What else do you think is on your wish list that you want to have in this community? If you know something, I would like to hear.
We're ready.
So, we go back to the finish of the percentage, like I don't know, percent. Go back.
Yeah. So that's life. Yes.
Okay, so when you look at the, so you can actually go for the finance information. Look at the needs. What about, I don't know, funding for the families that cannot afford a rental house? They don't, the funding is like city, most of the funding is through property taxes. The more people they have, the more money they get. So we're kind of, far away from the county headquarters. And we're competing with corporate headquarters more. And we'll get less money from everything, out the taxes. So, I think that's a big disadvantage. And when we leave the business these but they want to be equal. So they should look at the population, the actual needs that there is in the community, and change those numbers. Because if you say 30%, but that's not, don't think much. Actually, understood, will actually, the needs are created ones.
Yeah, these numbers have nothing to do with funding in general for city. You mentioned about property tax. Property tax really doesn't fund a whole lot of the city's budget. If you collect $1 property tax, the city probably gets somewhere between 5 and 15 cents of a dollar. That gets apportioned between many other districts in the state and everyone else. So people have this myth. They think that, yeah, we pay property taxes and the city gets the whole thing. I've been asked, oh yeah, we pay for property taxes. So then the question is, well, let's say we collect $100, so the city gets probably $10 or $15, maybe maximum $20. And that is through certain enforcement agreements between the county on the sharing of the revenue from property taxes. So the cities end up getting a very small amount. And these numbers here, whether it is 3% or 20%, that simply reflects the total number of houses that must be built in these jurisdictions. So as a city, we should be lucky and happy that we only need to build 3% of the total number of houses that needs to be built in the entire county. Because we will have a heavy burden. Say, for example, Hanford needs to build or facilitate to build almost 6,000 units. And that's a bigger task than being able to say, yeah, we will build 277 more homes. We think we can. Because as the city planner said, one of our tracks that are coming in has over 100 lots in it. And if all of that comes to fruition, the developer is going to build all that. We already met all of 75% of our requirement. And so we can rest easy. So this has nothing to do with what we might lose by the county taking away or quarter taken away or somebody else taking it. No, they get their due share just like us getting our due share of the revenue. The question is, how do you get the money to do the affordable housing projects from the state? That's the critical question.
And I also want to add here, just to let you know as well, this person is verified, this person is showing the amount of affordable housing we have to build as a county as a whole. Most jurisdictions, all jurisdictions, have a lower number of housing units. Because that means that we are growing our density, our growing. So the 3% is not our. County, 3%.
Yeah, but like I mentioned, a lot of things go together. When I mentioned property taxes, well, property taxes are the highest revenue. That's very important. And they give the community the services that they need. And to be honest, when you look at Hanford, they need to provide 59% of affordable housing. That's what the most funding from the state from the goals to those communities with a high percentage. So that puts Avenal in a lower disadvantage about getting funding to build more homes. When you look for the fact that we need more affordable housing in Avenal.
Yeah, I got
Then I'm looking at the overall picture. Because like I mentioned, Avenal only has limited resources apart from the city. So when they apply for funding, they continue to have to corporate to have more staffing. So they're able to get more funding, they do more homes, more affordable housing. So that when you look at those numbers, that's affect how much funding you get because they do not need much. You only need to do 3%. So but that doesn't reflect what's actually happening.
No, that 3% has no bearing on the funding that you can get. The funding that you will get for affordable housing is based on the applications that you make and your needs. So every community is treated differently. It's not otherwise somebody taking the money to a community that needs more houses to be built. Say, for example, in that case, all the money will go to the city of Los Angeles. They'll have to build over 50,000 homes. So none of us will get any money. So that's not how it works. Then the other factor to clarify is these numbers here, they are not all about affordable housing. That's the entire stretch of housing from very low to moderate to median, and low and moderate affordable housing, that's a small number. The marketplace housing also have to be built. So we don't have to really worry about that. We should be pleased to say our needs are less because our community is small. Therefore, our problems are also small. The larger the community, the larger the issue. However, whether it is one man or 100, your problem is the same as the other 100 people, and we need solutions for that. You have an issue of fair housing or a complaint to be made, and that must be heard. And we need to be able to provide that facility. So it has nothing to do with numbers. Of course, if you have 100 people here making the same complaint, yeah, there is a resource crunch. You need to have staff be able to handle 100 complaints. But the smaller the community, hopefully the number of complaints would be smaller and staff would be able to work with the county to provide us that help. At least, I mean, it's all about information. In LA County, they do have as part of a county a system where you can go online and you can attend workshops. Attorneys will conduct workshops on fair housing. You can ask all kinds of questions. I'm not sure if Kings County has a facility such as that, but even if you just go to the LA County website, you can read about so much of these fair housing issues that are affecting people in general. But as part of our plan, what we hope, we can put something on our city's website, teaching you, informing you of what your possibilities are if you have a complaint, and who can you contact, whether it's a city manager's office or the planner's office, or maybe working with the county, somebody at the county council's office. And that's what we are trying to get. And we really appreciate all your comments. I mean, this is the best meeting I have had of 8 communities that I've been working on. So I have to especially thank you all for making these comments known. And it's not easy to get people to participate. So if you don't have any other questions, or I'm still available here to take any more questions, you can inform the city planner of a specific question you have, and she will communicate that back to me. And we want to definitely thank the interpreter. That is something that the state wants us to do, because especially in communities when Hispanics are in greater numbers, where Spanish is a predominant language, along with English, then we want to make sure that everybody can be heard and understood. You know, sometimes I might need an interpreter for me to understand if you speak in Spanish, right? But unfortunately, I don't speak Spanish. I wish I could, you know, it's nice to know more languages so we can communicate better. But thank you very much. Do you have anything else? Before we already
There you
did that.
go.
Okay, good.
Okay, so, as you guys don't, if you guys don't know me yet, my name is Canoe Yang. I am the, oh, I'm so sorry, yeah. Let me talk in the mic, I apologize. All right, everyone, so, if you guys don't know who I am the, Director of Community and Economic Development here at the City of Avenal. My name is Canoe Yang, and I will be lead for the city in regards to the housing element. As Isaac stated, if you guys have any other questions or concerns, my contact information is on here with my email address as well. And if you guys, have any questions or want more input in regards to the housing element, please feel free to email me or even call City Hall and try to get a hold of me. As Isaac said, also, I am a one-person department, but we're trying really hard to try to be as efficient as possible. I want to say thank you so much for everyone attending. I'm very excited about the attendance that they come. So, and I'm just like Isaac, I'm very excited for all the questions that we got. And, you know, I'm very glad that the community is very invested into understanding what affordable housing is and what fair housing is. And that's something very important to us here in the city. With 80% of our zoning districts being residential, it's very important that we actually do talk about housing as it being such an important aspect within our community. So thank you guys so much, and I think that's all the closing comments I have. But if City Manager, if you want to say anything, you're good. Alrighty, thank you guys, everybody for coming to the town hall. Thank you so much to the interpreter for coming in and also interpreting to our citizens and residents. You guys all have a good night, okay? Thank you.
Yeah, business cards on you?
Thank you, sir. You're
Francisco.
Francisco.
Yeah, Francisco
Do
Lopez.
you work with?
I do not. My brother is a city manager, but I've a long time city resident. So
Oh, okay,
yeah.
good.
yeah, so I care about.
Yeah, I'm absolutely, you know, I mean, people like you can lead into the right direction.
Right,
For
right.
policies and.
With the process. There's other part that or we can put our little or sticker tag to put the input in there so that it can hopefully benefit the community or at least raise it to a point where we kind of understand, okay, there's a possibility here with funding or we have to at least make a blip, being small, we have to make a blip in what we might be able to do. The fair housing one, that is one that I used to live in the Bay Area for about 15 years, so that one, housing was always a contentious issue. Other stuff, I lived in.
It's a nightmare always.
About
sabes to make it smaller, to waste less ink, but to spend on less ink. That was my dad's one stuff. Yeah.
We still make it.
That's what my son is doing. Yeah, just downtown. It's not a big deal. No,
Process.
Programming, the whole thing. Until the end, it gets- That's all good. So we need to do that somehow because then we only have 4 months to get the approval. So I have to. Yeah, we also, when the draft is done, they will have a 30-day notice for the community. Otherwise, it's easy. But we go through the process. The draft is probably about, this is the cumulative combined document for all the 4 cities plus the county. Three hundred. Yeah, for subsection for including, and then we also have a housing document, which is separate. That also would be, I know I have 175 pages of maps and all. Yeah, so even if I cut some of them. Yeah, it would be.